Hello, and welcome to Praxis and Theodicy. Today's video looks at a prominent figure in Christian history who put their faith into action by sacrificially fighting for the oppressed. In this series of videos, we will be exploring radical activists throughout history who challenged the powerful systems of oppression in their society and did it not in spite of, but because of their faith. This is Christian history as you may not have heard it before. These are tales from the kingdom of heaven. On April 4th, 2018, the 50th anniversary of Martin Luther King Jr.'s death in 1968, 7 activists broke into a United States naval base in Kings Bay, Georgia, with the intent to destroy the means of launching weapons of mass destruction held therein. Armed with bolt cutters, hammers, vials of their own blood, and a written indictment against the United States government, they hoped to sabotage paper documents and dent the hardware of the missiles or the ballistics equipment on the Trident submarines. This was not the first time such an event had happened. Since the early 1980s, groups of anti-imperialist activists have taken up what is now referred to as plowshares actions. The name of their actions is taken from Isaiah 2, verse 4, which reads, "He will judge between the nations and will settle disputes for many people. They will beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation will not take up sword against nation, nor will they train for war anymore." Tracing their lineage back to the Catholic worker movement, which was birthed by Peter Maurin and Dorothy Day in the 1930s, these plowshare activists carry an ideology that is half anarchist, half Christian, and all in for the kingdom of heaven. They bring with them hammers to dent the missiles enough to make them unusable. They bring their blood to vandalize paper documents and to write their message, including Bible verses, on the walls of the military bases. In jail and under house arrest for the past 2 years, the Kings Bay 7 recently received sentencing for their participation in this most recent plowshare action. I wanted to share today some excerpts from a statement given at that sentencing by one Clare Grady. Clare was one of the 7 who infiltrated Kings Bay, although this was not her first plowshares action, so it was not her first time facing the wrath of the United States judicial system. The full statement will be linked in the description below, but for now, I want to highlight much of her statement that draws attention to the gospel of Jesus, to a commitment to speak for oppressed classes of people, to anarchist values, and how all of these led her into action. Clare's statement contains 12 points organized for her own thoughts. The first 6 points list things that define Clare, the things she loves in life. These are motherhood, a large extended family, the Bible, community, gardening, and the Ithaca, New York Mutual Aid Society, Loaves and Fishes. I want to point out that gardening may seem like a simple hobby that defines Clare, but it is actually a brilliant reflection she has of living out her call and purpose given by God in Genesis 1:28 to subdue the earth. Loaves and Fishes has its name taken from the book written by Dorothy Day, which describes the formation of the Catholic worker movement. Her description is worth highlighting as it succinctly describes an anarchist model of mutual aid as opposed to the oft-practiced charities and soup kitchens in many cities today. The delicious meals made from the shared abundance in our community and the spirit with which it is shared has been life-changing for me. The ministry is not just to care for those without food, but to provide a place where those of us with food, where we can break bread together, share lives, share resources, and build community, recognizing our common need for a common table. It is a place that offers blessing to all of us who enter the doors, offers each of us possibilities to be part of a beloved community. This focus on community meals is a synthesis of anarchist praxis and ancient Christian tradition that has typified movements like this modern one in Ithaca, New York. The next 6 points describe some of Grady's motivations to participate in plowshares actions. In point number 7, she describes a biblical mandate to care for and protect the least of these. She describes the withdrawing of consent from what the United States military does, for what it does is done by all its citizens, in our name and with our money. She states that the Kings Bay military base, with its weaponry, is public property, not private. She states that their actions are an act to withdraw consent from the violence of the American military machine. She names nuclear warfare as omnicidal and emphasizes that the threat of violence is still an evil act. Nuclear weapons are used, she says, the same way a cocked gun is used. Even if it is never fired, if you hold it to someone's head, you are using that gun. Her 8th point addresses the rule of law and due process. She mentions that the law must be progressive, not stagnant, because, as she states, the Bible says that law is here to serve humanity, not the other way around. She cites previous evolutions of modern international law. First, that weapons used to kill non-combatants are wrong, and as nuclear weapons are omnicidal, they fit the bill. Secondly, that citizens bear responsibility for the murderous actions of their government, which obligated them to actively withdraw consent. Her 9th point cites the Golden Rule, but outlines 4 key factors that make it so much richer than a simple do unto others. Listen, empathize, learn, and always be curious, not incurious. In her own words, if someone came to my place of work to take responsibility for the crimes within that were being committed in their name, and they brought with them no weapons, no threats, no hostility, if someone came to my place of work and did exactly what I did and sat peacefully taking responsibility for their action, I would be very moved to wonder, moved to question, moved to listen, and maybe even learn what such an act was all about. In point 10, she reminds us that prison itself is a crime leveled against humanity by the state, a particular crime in the dangers of COVID-19. In point 11, she urges everyone to listen to the voices of the oppressed. She emphasizes that experiencing oppression can help you empathize and can help you recognize your privilege, take responsibility for perpetuating systems of oppression, and to stop scapegoating the oppressed. The voices she wants us to listen to are a list of people who have been affected by nuclear war actions. Her words: I have had some profound awakenings in prison. One that seems important to tell often is that to the extent that those of us privileged by this system take responsibility for the big crimes of killing millions and stealing trillions, we will stop scapegoating those on the receiving end of those crimes, those living the legacy of enslavement, of poverty, of genocide. It's a bitter thing to be on the receiving end of such things, or to even have the teeniest taste of them, but I notice, and I do believe, that we will have greater possibilities for justice when we include the voices and experience of those on the receiving end of our big crimes. Before moving on to her final point, she also urges us to listen not just to the victims, but to the experts, to the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, to the Pentagon's forecast from 20 years ago, and to Martin Luther King Jr., who warned us about the triplets of the modern world: racism, militarism, and rampant materialism, or consumerism. Her 12th and final point emphasizes the need to recognize the indigenous people living on the continent America, whose land was stolen and who have been the first victims of nuclear war, at even the testing phase. She ends with a warning of the mindset that cannot be escaped by a nation who chooses to entertain a nuclear armament. All of us humans have experience, perhaps every day, of choosing our own will over and above God's will. The consequence varies, but it always goes better for the common good when we do not try to go against God's will. I see the trident as the ultimate logic of putting self-will above God's will. I see it as a violation of that trust in God, a violation of right relationship with God and neighbor and the least. This is an unsustainable course. we are either going to continue to clench our need for power and control to the point of death and the death of all living, or we could choose to let go and let God by disarming and restoring relationships.